What's your creepy mimic or skinwalker encounter experience? First off, I am a girl and live in North Carolina of the United States. I was 15 at the time of my encounter and was definitely not a believer in anything supernatural, paranormal, or anything of the sort. It happened while I was at a local summer camp. There was absolutely nothing special about that day, no weird lights, people, animals, sounds, nothing. It was just the same camp schedule as I'd grown used to in the past 2 weeks I'd been there. My age group had just finished lunch and was able to persuade our counselor to let us play a game called Scatter down by the lake. It's like a giant hide and seek in the woods. Now we had played this at least 20 times before that day, and nothing weird had happened to any of us, and we all grew up playing in the woods, so it's not like we had an aversion or fear of it, but for some reason, that day when our counselor shouted scatter, and I ran to find a hiding place, it became a whole new ballgame. I had run as far as I could while still being able to see the lake, as were the rules, and had found a huge old uprooted tree that I decided would be the perfect hiding place. So I laid down as close as I could against the ground and waited. I had been there for about 5 minutes when I suddenly heard a voice calling my name in a weird dreamy-like voice, and not just any voice, my mom's. Now me and my mom are extremely close, thick as thieves, so I'd know her voice anywhere, and I would swear on my own grave that it was without a doubt hers. But I knew it couldn't be her. She was 20 miles away at work, and even if it had actually been her and she'd come to pick me up early, the voice wasn't coming from the lake, it was coming from further out in the woods beyond the border of the camp. I knew I should have run away from this strange mimic mom voice, but I couldn't. It was almost hypnotic. It messed with my thoughts and gave me doubts like, well, it could be mom. Or, what if she's hurt? And I have to get to her. All these things were flooding into my mind like someone had broken a dam. I didn't know who was there until they finally overwhelmed me and emotions got the better of me and I took off running in the direction the voice was coming from. I ran as far as I could with only this strange voice as my guide. I couldn't have run for more than 5 or 7 minutes when I got to a clearing and the voice suddenly stopped. When I entered the clearing and didn't hear my mom's voice calling me anymore, I could finally think clearly again and started to have little alarm bells go off inside my head saying, "You idiot." Or, "That's not mom." And, "Run." But I couldn't run. I didn't know where to run. I had gotten so far away I had lost sight of the lake by camp and had absolutely no idea where I was, and I was completely exhausted to boot. With no other options than to sit and catch my breath, I did just that. No sooner had I sat down, more warning bells went off in my mind. I quickly did a 360 survey around the clearing and noticed a strange noise. It wasn't the continuation of the voice before, no, it was the distinct sound of chattering teeth, like if your teeth were cold. Only, there was no one else around, and it was the middle of June in North Carolina. There's no way someone could be cold. And that's when I heard it. Leaves and sticks crunch on the edge of the small clearing, and I realized something was watching me, and then whatever it was, moved fast in circles around the clearing. Almost like it was circling a prey. It was at that moment I knew whatever it was had led me out there away from the rest of my group, exactly like the predator my instincts had been screaming at me that it was. Without any other option other than to try and escape, I took off in the direction I thought I came from and sprinted as fast as I could. All the while, hearing the chittering of teeth and sticks crunching behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't dare turn around to see what was chasing me. I knew that if I did, I would slow down, and I absolutely would not make it. It felt like a lifetime running away from this thing before I finally saw the lake. Even though I didn't think I could run faster than I ever have in my life, I broke the tree line and ran to the lake where I knew my friends were. At that point, I felt safe enough to stop and look back and see just what had been chasing me, but when I did, I only saw a fleeting form running back the way I had come and the distinct sound of chittering teeth. When I finally found my counselor, who was the seeker to find all of us, I was hysterical with fear and hugged her as tight as I could. When I finally calmed down, she tried to get me to tell her what happened, but I just asked, "Were you calling my name?" Before she even said anything, I already knew the answer. After all, it had been my mom's voice that led me away from everyone else, but what she replied with was so much more bone-chilling to me. She told me, "No one called for you. We didn't know you were gone. Everyone is still hiding, the game isn't over yet." I never believed either until I had my own evidence. We lived in the mountains and it was a very foggy day, about to rain. I had to get my horses from the pasture because my mom was cooking dinner. I collected the horses and put them away, then I went back to shut the gate. If I didn't, a car would hit it going around the driveway. From the bottom of my driveway, I heard my name. I called back, "What?" thinking that I misheard. Again, I heard my name in my mother's voice. It was bizarre because my mom was inside and I didn't see her go to the bottom of the driveway. Still, I figured I should check it out, so I yelled back, "Hold on a minute," and again, she called my name, and not the shortened version. She called my full name, which she never did unless I was in trouble. I feared one of the horses had gotten loose, so I called back, "Okay, I'm coming." That's when I heard my mom call me inside from our deck. She yelled my name, the short version, and said dinner was ready. My heart dropped into my stomach. I kept peering down the driveway to catch a glimpse of what it might be, but I was baffled. We had no close neighbors. We lived in 3.5 acres and weren't very acquainted with the community. I asked everyone in my family why they were calling me from the bottom of the driveway, and each and every one of them said that they were in the house. I never thought much of it until I got older and started realizing that we are not on the top of the chain as everyone thinks we are. There's scary things in this world. You can choose to be naive, kids. You can choose to believe. I chose to believe. This happened about 6 years back. Back then, I lived in a small village just outside of Sherborne, Dorset in the UK. I can't remember exactly when, but I think it was about December-January time as it was freezing cold outside and I'd just left a parents' evening at school. Worked in Yeovil as a teacher. I was driving home about 8 p.m. and it was dark already. So, I was knackered, had my radio on, and did the 20 minutes drive home. The car was heating up, so I was starting to feel comfy and sleepy as I drove through Sherborne out into the Dorset countryside towards home. My house was situated down a single-lane road with woods on one side and big fields on the other. As I turn into the road, I slam my brakes on as there's something big in the road. It takes me a while to figure out that a giant fleabing dog is in the middle of the road leaving the fields and heading into the woods. This thing was bigger than the front of my car. Its head must have been at least 5 feet. I'm 6 feet, and it would have come up to my shoulders at least, off the ground. It looked like a giant German shepherd with dark fur all over from my brief impression, and it just stood there in profile with my headlights on it. Its head was turned towards me, and its lips were drawn back, and the snarl was terrifying. Honestly, not sure if it was the adrenaline or tiredness, but I've only been terrified like that in nightmares. My lasting impression were its teeth, which were massive, sharp and clenched together, and eyes that were fixed dead on me, even though my full beams were directly on the darn thing. I didn't wait to see what it did. I reversed back onto the road and went and had a pint in the pub back in Sherborne and googled what the Flurboys saw. I didn't find anything specific to the area. I finally found the courage to drive back and it's gone. I park as close to my house as possible and sprint to my front door with my keys ready and get inside. I was a 33-year-old teacher and felt ridiculous. I spent a good few hours just looking out the window seeing if I could spot anything, which I didn't, and I never did again. I was camping with family and went out into the woods with my sister. We had flashlights and knives since my parents didn't want us completely unarmed in the forest at night, but anyways, we reached a clearing about 200 meters from the campsite. We found some bones there and figured one of the bears or mountain cats had killed a deer. No biggie. We go to the opposite side of the clearing and we felt like something was watching us but couldn't figure out what was and from where, so we kept onward. About 3 minutes later, we hear something in the bushes to our left and a little ahead, but it sounded bigger than a small bush animal, like a small deer or a large rodent of some kind. It sounded like something closely human with the way the bushes moved. Then we heard whatever it was start to grunt. We run back towards the clearing, get to the center of the clearing and pull out our knives, so we have flashlights in one hand and knives in the other. Then I start to scream for my parents because I know they have a gun in the tent, then we see it just on the tree line. Something lanky and probably would be tall if not on all fours staring at us with reddish-orange eyes, but a pale white skin complexion. We bolted for the campsite and our parents had us sit in the tent while they looked around with the 2 guns they brought. I won't ever forget that thing. I've tried to figure out what it was. The only thing that has come close is a Wendigo, but the descriptions don't always add up. I know Skinwalker stories are a little overplayed, but this is genuinely one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. For a little context, I'm half Native American, with most of my family being from Oklahoma. I never really believed any of the stories I heard as a kid until I'm pretty sure I had a real encounter. When I was a kid, maybe 4th grade, me, my mom and my stepdad would visit my grandparents' property in Azle, Texas to shoot guns or fish and whatnot. Their property was surrounded by a couple of acres of land, so sometimes I would wander off from the house and explore wherever I could. One day, I decided to go for a short walk in the woods like normal. Maybe 5 minutes into my walk, mind you, I could still see the house in the distance. I hear my mom's voice say my name. It sounded distant but so distorted and close at the same time. I called back to her and looked around me. As I was turning around, I see this tall creature with gnarly teeth and gray, tattered skin looking at me from behind a tree. I stood there completely shocked because of how terrifying this thing looked. It started to move from behind a tree towards my direction, and I took off running and crying back towards the house. This is easily one of the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me, and I never even spoke about it until about a year ago. Before this point, I never had any cryptid paranormal experiences, but since then, I've had countless, wherever I go or move to, despite me only being 18 now.